The Grand Council chamber was silent as Ambassador Jack Daniels rose from his seat. The vast circular room, designed to accommodate representatives from over 300 civilizations across the galaxy, felt suddenly small. Through the enormous windows that lined the chamber, the stars of the neutral system shone coldly, indifferent to the tension that had been building over 3 years of peace negotiations. Jack straightened his formal diplomatic attire, emblazoned with Earth's unified emblem, a stylized globe surrounded by olive branches, and took a moment to survey the chamber. The council representatives, beings from every corner of the galaxy, watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Most prominent among them was High Chancellor Zextrol, whose multiple eye stalks narrowed in anticipation. Ambassador Daniels. Zextrol's voice resonated through the chamber's perfect acoustics. We have presented our final offer. 5-star systems along your expansion corridor, limited trading rights within council space, and a development tax of 30% for the next 50 standard years. The translator at Jack's ear rendered the Chancellor's clicking speech into perfect English. This is most generous considering humanity's relatively recent arrival on the galactic stage. Jack nodded, his face betraying nothing. At 45, he had spent the last decade representing Earth in these chambers, watching as other newer species were granted more favorable terms. Behind him, his aide Paula White tensed, already knowing what was coming. High Chancellor, esteemed members of the Galactic Council. Jack began, his voice steady. For 3 years I have sat in this chamber. For 3 years, humanity has offered technological innovations, cultural exchanges, and sincere friendship. For 3 years, we have been treated not as equals, but as fortunate beneficiaries of your supposed generosity. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Zextrol's secondary appendages twitched in irritation. The terms you offer would relegate humanity to second-class status for generations. Therefore, after consultation with Earth's unified government, I am authorized to inform you that we are withdrawing from these negotiations, effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Zextrol rose to his full 3-meter height, towering over his podium. This is unprecedented. You would reject the Council's benevolence. Jack raised his hand, silencing the chaos with unexpected authority. Furthermore, I am activating Protocol Omega. Paula stepped forward, her hand hovering over her communication device, waiting for Jack's final nod. When it came, she pressed a sequence that sent a quantum-encrypted signal racing across the galaxy to Earth. Protocol Omega. Zextrol's translator rendered his confusion perfectly. What is this? Jack smiled thinly. A contingency chancellor. Humanity thanks you for the educational experience these negotiations have provided. We have learned much about the Council's methods. With a formal bow that contained not a hint of subservience, Jack turned and began walking toward the chamber's exit. Paula followed a step behind her posture, rigid but confident. Ambassador Zextrol called after him. If you leave now, the Council will not look favorably upon future requests for admission. Jack paused at the doorway and turned. Who said anything about requesting admission again, Chancellor Goodday? As the massive doors closed behind the human delegation, leaving stunned silence in their wake, Ambassador Kuruval of the Eldarin Confederation leaned toward his aide. Most interesting, he whispered. Perhaps the humans are not as predictable as Zextrol claimed. In his private chamber, adjacent to the council hall, Jack Daniels removed his formal collar with a sigh of relief. Paula entered without knocking, her face tense. Signal confirmed, sir. Earth received Protocol Omega authorization. Admiral Miller acknowledges and indicates Operation Phoenix is commencing. Jack nodded, pouring himself a glass of water from a crystalline decanter. And now we wait. Sir, Paula hesitated, do you think the Council will retaliate? Jack's gaze drifted to the windows, where the massive Council flagship dominated the view. They'll want to, but they won't risk open hostilities, not when they believe we have nowhere else to go. He smiled. That's their first mistake. Aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship, Intrepid, Hovering at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Susan Miller reviewed the incoming quantum transmission. Her weathered face, marked by 30 years of military service, betrayed no emotion as she entered her authentication codes. Protocol Omega confirmed, she announced to her command staff. Operation Phoenix is now active. Commander Rivera, her tactical officer, stepped forward. All shipyard facilities are standing by, Admiral. Construction begins as soon as you give the word. Susan nodded, surveying the tactical display, where thousands of green indicators represented Earth's defensive grid. Send the activation codes, and alert all our allies in the border regions they'll need to prepare for possible Council probing missions. As her orders raced through the quantum network, Susan allowed herself a small smile. 3 years of preparation, all for this moment. Let's hope Ambassador Daniels was right about the Council's arrogance. In the days following humanity's withdrawal, the Council chamber became a theater of speculation and accusation. Chancellor Zextrol presided over increasingly heated debates, his authority visibly strained. This is nothing but a primitive negotiating tactic, insisted Ambassador Vra, of the Vrian Conclave, a longtime Council loyalist. The humans have nowhere else to go. They will return humbled and ready to accept our original terms. Kuruval of the Eldarin Confederation rose slowly, his ancient species' deliberate movements commanding attention. Perhaps, he suggested, his melodious voice, carrying effortlessly. We should consider that our approach was flawed from the beginning. Zextrol's eye stalks quivered with barely contained frustration. Flawed, we offered them 5 star systems. 5 undeveloped systems requiring massive terraforming, Kuruval corrected gently, while demanding 30% of their economic output for 50 years. He paused, allowing the numbers to sink in. Systems we have little use for, Chancellor. You suggest we should have offered more, Vra demanded incredulously. I suggest, Kuruval replied, that treating emerging civilizations as supplicants, rather than potential partners, may not serve our long-term interests. He gestured toward Jack Daniels's now empty seat. The humans have shown remarkable technological progress in the century, since their first interstellar voyage. Their innovations in quantum communications alone have enhanced Council operations significantly. Zextrol waved a dismissive appendage. Innovations freely shared in good faith during negotiations, which they have now abandoned. Have they? Kuruval's ancient eyes narrowed. Or have they simply recognized an unfavorable arrangement? I propose we dispatch an observational fleet to monitor Earth space. This Protocol Omega concerns me. After brief deliberation, the Council approved the measure. Zextrol authorized a fleet of stealth observer vessels to position themselves at the edges of human territory. Their mission to report any unusual activities and maintain Council awareness of humanity's next move. What they observed in the following months would shatter the Council's complacency forever. 6 months after Protocol Omega's activation, the once quiet Tau Ceti system buzzed with activity. Hidden from conventional sensors by Earth's revolutionary quantum stealth technology, massive shipyards had been constructed in orbit around the system's outer planets. Similar facilities operated in Alpha Centauri Epsilon Eridani and a dozen other systems loosely connected to Earth's sphere of influence. Admiral Miller stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned shipyard, Phoenix Wansho, watching as the hull of the EDF Defiant took shape before her eyes. At nearly 2 kilometers long, it would be humanity's first true capital ship, a vessel designed not for exploration or diplomacy, but for projecting power. Quite a sight, isn't it? Captain Nancy Bell joined her at the viewport. As the facility's operational commander, Bell had overseen the construction of 17 vessels already. 3 years of planning, Susan nodded. Ship designs refined in secret resources, stockpiled personnel trained, all while smiling politely at the Council's negotiators. Ambassador Daniels' reports from the Council were instrumental, Bell said, consulting her datapad. Every technology they revealed, every tactical capability they hinted at our engineers, have been developing countermeasures. Susan's lips quirked in a half-smile. The Council thought they were showing us how far behind we were. Instead, they were giving us their playbook. The quantum detection grid just picked up something, Bell said suddenly, her expression growing serious as she studied her pad. Council observation vessels trying to penetrate the system's outer reaches. Right on schedule, Susan nodded. Are our countermeasures functioning? Perfectly. They're seeing exactly what we want them to see, a handful of routine patrols, minor commercial activity. The shipyards remain undetected. Susan turned back to the viewport where the skeletal frame of the Defiant now gleamed under construction lights. Let's keep it that way, for now. On the Council homeworld of Krill Prime, Chancellor Zextrol reviewed the reports from the observation fleet with growing frustration. 8 months had passed since the humans' dramatic departure, and the intelligence gathered showed nothing unusual, just the expected patterns of a civilization operating within its limited sphere. No military buildup, he demanded of his intelligence director. No unusual diplomatic activity with other non-council races. Nothing significant, Chancellor, the director confirmed. Some increased trade with the border worlds, but nothing that suggests a grand strategy. By all appearances, they are simply continuing their normal activities. Zextrol paced the length of his private chambers, his eye stalks swiveling in agitation. It makes no sense. They withdrew with such confidence, such purpose. He stopped abruptly. What about this Protocol Omega? Have we uncovered its meaning? Our analysts believe it may have been a bluff, Chancellor. A final show of defiance before inevitable isolation forces them to return to negotiations. Zextrol wasn't convinced. Something about Jack Daniels' demeanor that day continued to trouble him. Double the observation fleet, he ordered, and dispatch infiltration teams to their border worlds. I want to know what they're planning. What Zextrol couldn't know was that every Council observation vessel was being meticulously tracked by Earth's quantum sensor grid, a technology humanity had deliberately kept hidden during the negotiations. Each infiltration team was identified, monitored and fed carefully curated information designed to reinforce the Council's expectations. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room on Earth, Jack Daniels met with representatives from a dozen independent worlds, civilizations that, like humanity, existed on the fringes of Council space. The Council has systematically restricted your development, just as they attempted to restrict ours, Jack explained, gesturing to the holographic display, showing trade restrictions and development limitations imposed by Council mandates. They present themselves as benevolent guides while ensuring newcomers remain dependent and subordinate. Ambassador Trell of the Folus Collective, a methane-breathing species from a system just beyond Council space, leaned forward. What you say matches our experience, Ambassador Daniels. But what alternative do you propose? The Council controls most major trade routes and technology exchanges. Jack smiled. Not for long. Earth proposes a new association, the Mutual Progress Alliance. Equal membership, shared technological development, and coordinated defense. He activated another display showing projections of economic growth and technological advancement. Together, we can create an alternative to Council dependency. And if the Council objects, asked another representative, this one from the crystalline hive mind of Proxima Beta. They will, Jack acknowledged, which is why the defense aspect of our proposal is crucial. With a gesture, he revealed images of the shipyards and vessels humanity had been constructing in secret. Earth has been preparing for this moment for 3 years. We are ready to ensure the Alliance's security, while our collective strength grows. The meeting lasted for days with intense discussions and negotiations. Unlike the Council's dictated terms, everything was open for discussion, compromises were made, and concerns addressed. When the representatives finally departed, 11 of the 12 worlds had provisionally agreed to join the Mutual Progress Alliance. Earth's gambit was working. 1 year after Protocol Omega's activation, the Council received alarming news. A Vrian patrol fleet investigating unusual energy signatures near the border of Council space had encountered an unknown military force. Ambassador Vra, visibly shaken, addressed the council. Our patrol was confronted by a fleet of previously unknown design. When challenged, they identified themselves as vessels of something called the Mutual Progress Alliance, and warned our commanders to withdraw from their claimed territory. Murmurs swept through the chamber as Vra continued. When our commanders demanded identification, a human officer responded. The fleet included ships from Earth as well as vessels from the Pholis Collective Proxima Beta and several other border civilizations. Chancellor Zextrol's appendages trembled with suppressed rage. How many vessels? 27 capital ships, Chancellor. Most of a design our analysts have never encountered. When our fleet attempted to maintain position for further observation, they were... Vra hesitated. They were targeted by weapon systems of concerning power. Rather than risk confrontation, our commanders withdrew. The council erupted in outrage and confusion. Kuruval of the Eldarin Confederation alone remained calm, a knowing expression on his ancient features. This is outrageous, Zextrol thundered, bringing the chamber to order. The humans have clearly been conspiring against the council, building military forces in secret, and suborning potential council applicants into this rebel alliance. Kuruval rose slowly. With respect, Chancellor, perhaps we should consider that these civilizations have chosen alignment with Earth because they found the Council's terms undesirable. His calm voice cut through the chamber's tension. Ambassador Daniels warned us 3 years ago that humanity would not accept subordinate status. It appears they have found others who share that perspective. Are you defending this betrayal? Vra demanded. I am suggesting, Kuruval replied evenly, that we may have created this situation ourselves. The Council's approach to emerging civilizations has grown increasingly extractive in recent centuries. Perhaps this Mutual Progress Alliance is simply the natural response. Zextrol dismissed Kuruval's concerns and ordered an immediate diplomatic and military response. Formal protests were dispatched. A council battle group was assembled to monitor the situation near the newly proclaimed alliance borders. What happened next would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. 16 months after the activation of Protocol Omega, disaster struck the Vrian Conclave. The dreaded Void Horde, a nomadic predatory species from the galactic rim, launched a massive assault on the Vrian colonial system of Telos. Millions of Vrian colonists faced annihilation. Ambassador Vra, once the Council's staunchest traditionalist, found himself begging for immediate military assistance. The Horde has bypassed our outer defenses, he reported frantically. Our fleet is outnumbered 3-1. Without Council intervention, Telos will fall within days. Chancellor Zextrol hesitated. The Council fleet was positioned near Alliance space, days away from Telos, at maximum speed. Redeploying would leave the border unprotected against Alliance expansion. We must consider the strategic implications, Zextrol temporized. The Council cannot leave its borders exposed to the Alliance threat. Vra's translator struggled to convey his horror. Chancellor, we are speaking of 20 million Vrian lives. As the Council debated, a quantum communication arrived addressed directly to Ambassador Vra, but broadcast openly to the entire Council. The message activated, and Jack Daniels' face appeared. Ambassador Vra, the Mutual Progress Alliance has received distress signals from Telos. Our intelligence confirms the Void Horde attack. Be advised that an Alliance response fleet departed 6 hours ago and will reach Telos within 12 hours. We request that any Vrian forces still in the system coordinate with Commodore Walsh of the Earth Defense Force to maximize civilian evacuation. The Council chamber fell silent as the message ended. Vra turned slowly towards Zextrol, his species equivalent of disbelief evident in his posture. The humans knew, he said quietly. They monitored the Horde's movements, predicted the attack. While we debated, they acted. Before Zextrol could respond, another communication arrived, this one from the commander of the Council fleet. Chancellor, we're detecting multiple large vessel signatures moving at high speed toward the Telos system. Configuration matches what we know of Alliance vessels. They appear to be on an intercept course with the Void Horde fleet. Kuruval rose once more. It seems, Chancellor, that while we positioned our fleet to contain the Alliance, they positioned theirs to protect lives, including those of a council member, who has shown them nothing but contempt. The political fallout was immediate. Several council members demanded Zextrol's resignation for failing to protect Vrian citizens. Others called for a complete reassessment of the council's approach to the Alliance. 2 days later, as the council continued its emergency session, reports filtered in from Telos. The Alliance fleet, led by Earth vessels, but including ships from 6 other member worlds, had engaged the Void Horde. Against all expectations, they had prevailed, driving the Horde from the system after a brutal battle that cost the Alliance several ships. More significantly, over 15 million Vrian colonists had been evacuated to safety aboard Alliance transports before the Horde could reach the main settlements. When the Council fleet finally arrived, they found Alliance vessels conducting rescue operations, providing medical assistance to Vrian survivors, and establishing defensive perimeters against possible Horde reinforcements. Commodore Linda Walsh of the Earth Defense Force, commanding the Alliance fleet, from the bridge of the EDF Defiant, greeted the Council commander with professional courtesy. "You're welcome to join the relief effort," she offered. "We've established triage centers on the third moon and begun evacuating critically wounded to medical facilities in neighboring systems." The Council commander, expecting to find antagonism, was momentarily speechless. "The Council appreciates your assistance to the Vrian people," he managed finally. Walsh nodded. "The Alliance protects all sentient life regardless of political affiliation. If you'll excuse me, I have rescue operations to coordinate." As reports of the Alliance's actions spread throughout Council space, public opinion began to shift dramatically. Species that had accepted Council leadership for centuries began questioning whether that leadership truly served their interests. Border worlds, once eager for Council admission, now looked toward the Alliance with new interest. In an emergency vote 3 days later, the Council removed Zextrol from the Chancellorship. His replacement, a moderate from the Tellurian Republic, immediately proposed opening formal diplomatic relations with the Mutual Progress Alliance. As Jack Daniels prepared to lead the Alliance delegation to these new negotiations, he reflected on how completely Protocol Omega had succeeded. Earth hadn't just escaped an unfavorable arrangement, it had fundamentally altered the galactic status quo. "Ambassador," Paula interrupted his thoughts. "The Eldarin delegation is requesting a private meeting before the formal talks begin." Jack nodded, not surprised. "Kuruval has been playing a long game just as we have. Show him in." The ancient Eldarin entered Jack's quarters with the deliberate grace of his species. Once privacy was assured, he fixed Jack with a knowing look. "Most impressive, Ambassador Daniels. I suspected Earth had a strategy when you walked out of the Council, but even I did not anticipate the scope of your preparations." Jack gestured for Kuruval to take a seat. "The Eldarin Confederation has always been more perceptive than most Council members." "Indeed," Kuruval agreed. "Perceptive enough to recognize that the Council's approach to governance has grown increasingly dysfunctional over the centuries. The Eldarins have been seeking a catalyst for change. And now you've found one," Jack concluded. Kuruval inclined his head in acknowledgement. "The Eldarin Confederation would like to formally apply for membership in the Mutual Progress Alliance." Jack couldn't hide his surprise. The Eldarins were founding members of the Council, one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in known space. Their defection would send shockwaves through the galactic community. "The Alliance would be honored," Jack said carefully. "But I'm curious, why now?" "Because you have demonstrated something the Council has forgotten," Kuruval replied. "True strength lies not in domination, but in cooperation. The Void Horde incident proved that beyond any doubt. While the Council debated protocol, the Alliance saved lives. As news of the Eldarin application spread, the Council's position continued to erode. Over the following months, dozens of civilizations formally withdrew from the Council and petitioned to join the Alliance. Each departure further weakened the Council's economic and military position, creating a cascading effect. 2 years after Protocol Omega's activation, Jack Daniels stood in the newly constructed Alliance Assembly on Earth, a vast circular chamber, reminiscent of the Council Hall, but designed with equal accommodation for all member species. Representatives from 67 worlds occupied the chamber, with Earth holding a single vote equal to all others. The founding charter of the Mutual Progress Alliance, Jack announced, has been ratified by all member worlds. Its core principles, equal representation, mutual defense, shared technological development, and free trade, will guide our cooperative future. Among the delegates, Ambassador Vra of the Vrian Conclave, now a provisional alliance member, watched with newfound respect. The salvation of Talos had forced him and his people to reconsider their assumptions about humanity and the other fringe civilizations. After the formal ratification, Admiral Susan Miller joined Jack on the observation deck overlooking Earth's night side, the lights of humanity's cities gleaming below, while construction lights from orbiting shipyards shimmered above. Protocol Omega succeeded beyond our wildest expectations, she noted. When we started planning this 3 years ago, we hoped merely to secure a fair position for Earth. Instead, we've reshaped galactic politics. Jack nodded, watching as delegates from dozens of worlds mingled in the gardens below. The Council failed to understand something fundamental about humanity, Admiral. Throughout our history, we've faced challenges by innovating, adapting, and cooperating. They saw our technological progress but missed our capacity for building alliances. Their arrogance was their downfall, Susan agreed. They expected supplication and received revolution instead. Jack smiled. Not revolution, evolution. The galaxy was ready for a new approach. We just provided the catalyst. As if to punctuate his statement, a notification appeared on the transparent display beside them. Another 5 worlds' former council members had formally requested alliance membership. 5 years after the activation of Protocol Omega, the once mighty Galactic Council officially dissolved. Its former headquarters on Krill Prime stood largely empty, a monument to an obsolete approach to interstellar relations. On Earth, the first Galaxy Cooperation Congress convened in the expanded Alliance Assembly. Representatives from over 200 worlds, nearly the entire civilized galaxy, gathered to formalize the transition from the old order to the new. Jack Daniels, now serving as Earth's representative to the Alliance Leadership Council, watched with satisfaction as former enemies worked together on committees addressing everything from trade regulations to joint scientific initiatives. The Harmony Building, constructed specially for this historic gathering, symbolized the Alliance's philosophy. Unlike the imposing Council Hall with its hierarchical design, Harmony featured equal accommodations for all species' advanced translation systems, ensuring perfect communication and architecture that incorporated elements from dozens of member worlds. At the building's heart stood a monument bearing the Alliance motto in the languages of all member species: Merit, Cooperation, Innovation. Paula White, now an ambassador in her own right, joined Jack as he surveyed the assembly. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years since you walked out of the council chamber," she remarked. "I was terrified, you know. I thought they might imprison us on the spot." Jack chuckled. The council never understood the power of simply walking away from a bad deal. They were so accustomed to dictating terms that they couldn't conceive of anyone rejecting them entirely. And now, Paula gestured toward the massive chamber, where former council stalwarts sat alongside the fringe worlds they once dismissed. "Now we've created something better," Jack said simply. "Not perfect. No system with so many diverse interests could be, but fundamentally fair. A system where merit matters more than history, where cooperation trumps domination, and where innovation is rewarded rather than controlled." A soft tone announced the session's commencement. Jack and Paula took their seats as the Congress President of Vrian ironically called the historic gathering to order. "Representatives of the galaxy," the President began, "today, we formalize what began as a bold act of defiance and has grown into the greatest cooperative endeavor in known history. Jack's mind drifted momentarily to that tense moment years ago when he had activated Protocol Omega. The plan had been a gamble, Earth and its allies building military and economic strength in secret, while presenting a facade of isolation to Council observers. It could have failed in countless ways, leaving humanity truly isolated in a hostile galaxy. Instead, it had revealed a truth the Council had desperately tried to suppress. Their system of governance had been failing for centuries, maintained only by tradition and the lack of a viable alternative. Once that alternative emerged, a genuinely cooperative alliance based on mutual benefit, rather than hierarchical control, the old order had collapsed with surprising speed. As the president continued outlining the Congress's agenda, Jack noticed Ambassador Kuruval watching him from across the chamber. The ancient Eldaran inclined his head slightly, in acknowledgement, one architect of change recognizing another. Jack returned the gesture, remembering Kuruval's quiet support in the council during those tense early days. The Eldaran had recognized the potential of the alliance before most subtly guiding events, while maintaining his species' traditional neutrality. Without his influence, the transition might have been far more turbulent. The Congress proceeded smoothly, ratifying agreements on interstellar trade, scientific cooperation, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. Where the Council had once imposed mandates, the Congress negotiated consensus. Where privileges had once been granted, based on seniority, resources were now allocated based on need and contribution. Most significantly, the Congress established the Void Horde Defense Initiative, a joint military operation to protect the galaxy's border regions from the nomadic predators. Species that had once competed for Council favor now coordinated fleet movements and shared intelligence, creating a more effective defense than the galaxy had ever known. When the final votes were tallied and the new galactic charter officially ratified, spontaneous celebrations erupted throughout the chamber. Representatives who had once eyed each other with suspicion now embraced as allies. Translation devices worked overtime as congratulations were exchanged in hundreds of languages. In his closing address, Jack Daniels spoke not of Earth's role in creating the alliance, but of the collective achievement it represented. What we celebrate today is not the triumph of one approach over another, he told the assembled delegates, but the recognition that our diversity of perspectives, when brought together in good faith, creates something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. We have not merely replaced the Council, we have transcended it. As the Congress adjourned, Jack found himself approached by an unexpected figure, former Chancellor Zextrol, now attending as a private observer from his homeworld. Ambassador Daniels. The former Chancellor began his translator, rendering his clicks and whistles into measured English. It appears I must acknowledge your wisdom. Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised by the admission. That's generous of you, Chancellor. Former Chancellor Zextrol corrected. And it is merely accurate. When you activated your Protocol Omega, I believed you were committing your species to isolation and eventual surrender. Instead, he gestured at the chamber, where hundreds of delegates mingled freely. Instead, you created this. Not I, Jack corrected gently. All of us together, including you in your way. Zextrol's eye stalks registered confusion. How so? By offering such obviously unfavorable terms, you united Earth's factions behind a single purpose. Our governments had been debating our approach to galactic integration for years. Your final offer ended that debate instantly. For a moment, Jack thought the former Chancellor might take offense, but instead, a sound emerged that the translator rendered as laughter. Most ironic, Zextrol admitted. In attempting to secure the Council's dominance, I catalyzed its replacement. He straightened to his full height. My species values growth through learning, Ambassador. I have learned much from observing your alliance's formation. Jack nodded in acknowledgement. The alliance welcomes all who share its principles, Chancellor, even those who once opposed them. As Zextrol departed, Admiral Susan Miller appeared at Jack's side. Diplomatic to the end, she observed. You didn't mention how close we came to direct conflict with his fleet near Telos. Jack shrugged. History is written by choices, not almost words. He chose to come here today. That says more than any grudge could. Together, they walked through the Harmony Gardens where botanical specimens from hundreds of worlds grew together in a carefully designed ecosystem. The garden stood as a living metaphor for the Alliance itself, diverse elements thriving through mutually beneficial relationships rather than competition. "What's next for the architect of galactic transformation?" Susan asked, only half joking. "Retirement." Jack laughed. "Hardly. The Congress has approved the first joint scientific expedition beyond the galactic rim. Someone needs to make sure our first contact with truly unknown civilizations goes better than our experience with the Council." "And who better than the man who walked away from a bad deal and created a better one?" Susan nodded approvingly. "When do you leave?" Jack gazed upward where the first stars were becoming visible in Earth's evening sky. 3 months. Time enough to establish the new protocols and train my replacement. Protocol Omega worked because we were prepared before we walked away. He continued thoughtfully. This time, we'll be prepared before we reach out. No more reactive diplomacy. The Alliance will set the terms of first contact, from a position of genuine goodwill and strength. As night fell over the Harmony complex, lights activated in the gardens, illuminating the pathways where representatives of hundreds of species continued their discussions and celebrations. The ancient council, with its rigid hierarchies and extractive policies, was already becoming a historical footnote. In its place stood something unprecedented, a true interstellar community, based on values that humanity had long aspired to, but often failed to achieve: equality, cooperation, innovation, and respect for diversity. The galaxy had entered a new era, catalyzed by a simple act of defiance and the courage to envision a better alternative. Jack Daniels, watching the galaxy's representatives forge connections that would shape centuries to come, allowed himself a moment of pride. Protocol Omega had been designed merely to secure humanity's place among the stars. Instead, it had transformed the stars themselves.